Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Midnight Charette, hosted by myself, David Lee, and, of course, Marina Bourderonnet. Bourderonnet, as Siri refers to you as. Actually, Siri says, if I could do a British accent, it would be something like, "Oh, Marina Bourderonnet, cup of tea," or something. You know, that's what Siri. I chose a feminine Siri.
I like when she says my name. I think it's really cute.
Yeah.
It's like, Marina Bourderonnet.
Yeah.
I feel like, ooh, I just gained a few inches or something.
Yeah, that is your name. So today, we get a lot of different kind of emails and messages across different platforms. I mean, a lot. We get messages and things. And a lot of them overlap to a certain degree, and we usually try to respond to everyone individually. But we thought it would be useful to maybe select a few of them and answer them on the podcast, or just have a discussion around them. You know, answers, we can't quite promise that, but have a discussion about them. And that would help all the people that have reached out regarding something similar. And also, I think there's a fair number of people listening who probably have the same thoughts, but are afraid to raise their hand in the classroom, which there's no fear. It's not a classroom. There's no in-person kind of, sweatiness. It's just over the magic of digital media and the hotline, which is 213-222-6950. You should just call that, leave a voicemail.
Which a few of you did already, so thanks for that.
Yeah, so when you call the hotline, if you call it, that's fantastic, but give us a little information about yourself. What's your name? What's your secret identity? What's your favorite color?
Where you're calling from?
Yeah, where you're calling from. That'd be good, yeah.
Calling from the bathroom, from the office. like the city or location.
I got the shit. Okay, so, I'm shitting in Seattle. That's what it is. Okay, so there's a few different ones.
Always in finesse, right?
Yeah. One of them was an email, and it's on the longer side, which is good because I think it covers a lot of common things. So I'm going to read the email. I'll leave out some of the details, and then you wrote answers to it, so I'm going to rely on you to kind of kickstart the answers.
No pressure.
I was looking at the email beforehand. I'm like, I don't know what to say. So you'll answer. Okay. I've listened to almost every episode of the podcast and thoroughly enjoyed the dialogue between you two and the two guests. Fuck me. Okay, let me try that again.
I hate when you read.
I know.
It's so painful.
I've listened to almost every... I'm a teacher also. Can you imagine? It's a
so
popcorn,
boring.
Everyone else but myself. I've listened to almost every episode of the podcast and thoroughly enjoy the dialogue between you two and the guests. You've put out great content and advice for young designers like myself, but I wanted to reach out with a few specific questions. I graduated from a school in 2017, and I'm working in the, let's say, East Coast area. I've used the podcast over the past 1.5 years or so to stay engaged in design thinking and theory. I work for a large corporate firm and I'm just not happy. Yes, I'm learning about the profession and some technical skills, but there's not a design focus. I feel like... What?
You're rushing.
No, I'm not rushing. I feel like I'm learning bad habits and becoming complacent, which is my biggest fear right now. I feel that my design sensibility is being compromised. I've been looking for a new job over the last 6 months, and now I want to leave my city to move to Philadelphia. Do you have any advice on how to get a job at a great firm that's doing great work, because I'm having trouble getting a new job? Or what I should be doing more than I already am to get an interview? I've applied to a few places, sent my stuff to multiple firms I'm looking at, and I've followed up several times over the past 6 months, even if they weren't hiring at the time. I'd rather not, but do I have to move to New York, LA, or San Francisco to get a position at a great place? Or should I just get a position somewhere in Philly just to get into the city? The Philadelphia market is small, but it's where I want to be. And lastly, do you have any advice on how to find a mentor? Or how does that relationship even begin? Begins with a rose.
Well,
ceremony.
I like those emails when there is many questions. I feel like, there is a lot of things that we can talk about. But first and foremost, thank you so very much for being a loyal listener. And, listening to almost every of our episode is quite a bit of nonsense and rambles and eye rolling. So thank you for that. It truly means a lot. Now, we're also very sorry to hear that, things are not working out for you. It's always sucks. And I feel like we've probably all of us listening have been in one situation like that before. So it's, a sentiment that we can all share. I did started to work on those answers to these questions. I just want to say that, they're mostly from
thoughts,
they're my thoughts. I don't have all of the information about this person, this situation, and enough to maybe be more direct on it. So take it lightly. They're personal advice that I would give to any of my friends, for example, or things that I have implemented or I would implement if I was in that situation.
Yeah.
Just as a disclaimer.
Okay.
No pressure.
You're really concerned someone's going to write back and be like, this is stupid advice.
I don't know the person, right? So I'm not sure how those answers is going to be taken. So I just want
to... Sure.
Don't sue me for it.
Okay. He's going to write back, I'm now homeless because of your advice. Thank you very much. Okay, so the first big one is that he's working at a large corporate firm, and he's learning about the technical stuff, profession stuff, but not the design aspect of architecture, right?
Well, the first thing he said is that he's just not happy. And I think to me that's the hardest part of making a move in your career is if you have to make a move because you're not happy, you've made the hardest move already. You've realized you're not happy and you've realized where and why you're not happy. He's not happy because he's not doing design work, so that's a huge step. That's
true actually, because I think a lot of people are, happy or even possibly as far as depressed, and they don't even know it. Because as he said, you become complacent, you become kind of unaware, you become tone deaf to all the badness that's going on. So the fact that he's aware of it is great, but it's painful. And I've always felt that once you feel inside of you that change, and it is a change from, let's say, you're being content to not content, it's a switch, and I feel like it's a permanent switch. And once you know that I've got to leave, that kind of urge, it stays with you, and it's almost like there's no going back, kind of.
It's almost like, when you're thinking about a divorce or breaking up, to me, as soon as you put that flavor in your head, that's it. It's just gonna spread somehow more and more and more. Like the fact that you have that thought is just not a good sign.
But the trick is, though, you have to know why you're unhappy, right? And he's saying it's because he wants more design. And, there's probably more to it than that. There's other things too, which he has to think about. And that's really important, because otherwise you're going to end up making a move kind of predicated on false information or wrong information. So that's just something to be aware of, and sometimes it's one big thing, but a lot of times it's a lot of microaggressions, like the times that, not to go too far on a tangent, but the times that we worked at offices, and I can look back and say, like, you or me, like, were really unhappy. I look back, it's because work wasn't good,
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you spend, all of the hours of your day, 8 or more on that. So if you're not happy being on that, it's not good.
And what happens is then, for me at least, you start to think that you're unhappy because of other stuff. Am I unhappy because my diet's not good, because of the relationship I'm in, or because of the friends I have, or this other life event that happened? I'm upset and sad because of those things, but really end up being the job, right? So that's parallel to this. Like if you think it's design and it's design, great, but you have to be willing to kind of further investigate that, because it might be something a little bit different.
And I think ultimately, if you're not happy working on what you're working on, that ultimately somehow impact your work.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you absolutely don't want for your own sake, right? Like you don't want to be doing the work in a way that is not optimum and it's not the best that you could give, because it's not the project's fault, it's not the client's fault. If you're not happy, it's just where you are, your boss, your firm, and other life things, but what you're working on is not related to that directly. So I don't think it should be the consequences of that unhappiness. Which brings me to say that I think the first thing I would try to do to solve my situation, which actually also happened to me directly. I was on a project for many months and I was miserable on it. I didn't really care for the team. I didn't care for the management. I didn't, there was issues on the project that were not just the project. And I've also worked on projects I was not interested in, and I asked to move project to be more on what I think would make me happy. And the first thing I did was trying to find a person in the office, ideally someone that's, on the higher up side that could help move around if you need to, and that would be receptive to what I had to say, kind of a confident, almost as a mentor in a way, right?
Confidant.
Someone who would care for your happiness within the firm.
So you're talking about trying to solve the problem or alleviate it temporarily within the office.
Yeah, because sometimes that's like you want to do design work versus technical work, but sometimes you also just want to get out and meet new people, work for a new team, have a new environment, like bring yourself back to life in another way. But that could take a little while, right?
Yeah.
So if there is somehow a way you can mitigate and facilitate that transition, if you have to stick around for another 4 months in that office where you're not happy, maybe you could ease out and still bring back some form of happiness in that office while you're waiting to get the new job.
Right.
Unless you land a new job in a week, that's great. You don't have to worry about that. But if like in his scenario, it's taking a while, maybe there is a Band-Aid you can put on in between,
Yeah. And I think, there's other things you could do, which are kind of obvious. It's like you could always moonlight and do other activities to satisfy your design cravings. And he uses podcasts in that way, which is good. And I understand that at some point that's not enough. Podcasts alone, or even doing competitions and things, and also it's exhausting if you try to do stuff in the evening. So let's say one piece of advice would be to take on a design competition. Well, it's fucking easier said than done. When you work full time at an architecture office, and it's either 40 hours at a minimum or much more than that, doing a design competition like on the side for funsies is really challenging if you're going to be serious about it. You can kind of fuck about with it. But,
I think a competition is a little extreme, but
but I mean, other activities.
But the idea of the Band-Aid is interesting, right? And maybe you're right. Maybe it doesn't even need to be within your office. Maybe your 8 hours a day don't bring you happiness, but maybe you start a new sport, you experiment making things, you start a new hobby in between now and until you find the next job. And at least after your 8 hours at the office, there is something that brings you happiness.
Yeah. Booze. So, he says there's not a design focus. And if we were to talk to this person in person, we'd have a much better understanding of what this quote unquote design focus means. And that's a pretty broad term. I'm not kind of placing blame or criticizing what he wrote at all, because it's a very thorough email compared to what we get from most people from the podcast and other things. No, not for the podcast, but for other things. People write emails. It's like, how do I get a job? Okay, well, fuck. That's kind of, design focus. So, design ranges, there's a whole spectrum of what that could mean. It could be either aesthetics, choosing color palettes and furniture layouts, and this kind of meaning of design. It could mean design in terms of like big conceptual theoretical. That's what some people think of design more like to gesture. Be. Or not even that, but paper architects like really design, pushing the boundaries of the profession of architecture by doing new types of construction, and that's qualifies as like new radical design, or it's design of a certain aesthetic, or it's design of diagrams. There's a big range.
Well, so, and even the construction phase, the CD set has a lot of design. Exactly. Like once you start drawing every inch of a project, you actually get into. I actually, you know what? It's actually the best part of designing is that phase, because it's a lot of details that you're working on oftentimes, and no one is really approving it. Like, right. You're not going to show the base or the door trim detail to the client necessarily. Like if you're working on the tower, no one like really cares, right? You could put a reveal of an inch, quarter inch, like no one would tell you what. So you can actually make your own little mini decisions like everywhere, kind of like hidden power moves.
Yeah, and I think that qualifies as design. I think
the different scales of
different
design.
scale of design, but it is that's a different type of design, let's say, or scale of it than, initial big concept, like, is this building going to be square or circle or like float, so we don't know what he's talking about, but the thing is, like, you need to realize that there are these different facets of quote unquote design, and I think a well-rounded architect is going to be interested in all of them. So maybe, if there's 6 different types of design focus, right? Maybe the one that you're most interested in, you can't get at your office. And a lot of times for younger designers, it tends to be the big conceptual stuff. Like, I'm really interested in,
like volumetry.
Volumetric diagrammatic things, or I'm interested in like movable transforming architecture. Like, this is really big concept things. That's difficult to find. But you still have another 5 other design focuses that you need to hone your skills on. So within the office, I would look to see if there's still design skills you can learn. They just might not be that specific one. And I've said this before, like, at corporate offices, which get a bad rap, young designers see their work and just, blech, yeah, it's like, whatever. That's so typical. It's so, they're not questioning things and whatever. But the number of decisions and questions, the number of decisions that have to be made in the construction of a final building like you're describing, or a more generic one, there's still a lot of design happening, a lot of things to be figured out. And it's a different skill set too. So that's what I would say to anyone who feels like they aren't getting the design skills from their job and there's not that focus. Well, maybe you need to think more specifically about what things you could pull from it in terms of designing of details like you're talking about, or designing of facades and things. Like, they're all different, and just because you can think big conceptual design moves does not mean you can execute.
And I think asking yourself that question when you are looking for the jobs and you're applying and you're interviewing is a good exercise, because eventually you will have to voice what you're interested in that new job, right? Yeah. What do you want to maybe start with when you start there? So having a very specific idea would definitely help the people potentially hiring you to, think of where and which team and which project to put you on when you start.
And, he says that I feel like my design sensibility is being compromised. And that's a really interesting statement. And I've always wondered, if you've gone through school and you're, a dedicated architect or designer, and it's what you care about, and you did so, therefore you did well in school, you're not some slack off, and you've worked for a few years and you took like a 1-year break, how much of those skills do you actually lose? Or is it like riding a bike? Do they never go away? And I think for some of the more conceptual aspects of design, I don't think those necessarily go away. And they're easier to maintain because you can consume those ideas through podcasts, through readings, and through other things. When he says that...
And what he graduated for, in 2017. So he's still fairly fresh out of school. I wouldn't be too worried that, you lost it.
No, and, he might have very strong design sensibility. So the thing is, like, if you have a really strong sense of self and strong sense of what you're interested in terms of design or anything else, that doesn't really go away. I think it evolves, and maybe there can be a big life event that causes you to make a hard right turn, but those things still live inside of you, which is why, like, thesis projects for students, those thesis projects end up becoming their, like, life's work a lot of times, because they've had that magical 9 months of naked space to like really think, which is rare, and it sets them in that kind of direction. So anyway, but with his design sensibility being compromised, again, well, there's a range of design sensibilities, and maybe this one that you really care for is not. I don't know if it would go away. Maybe it's just not being advanced, but you can spend time advancing the other ones.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, people who are interested in like this more design aspect of project, if you're looking to switch firm and go work for one of the offices that are more interested into creating designy things more than maybe like standard architecture, it's good. But if you're interested in having your own design sense and like your freedom within that realm, you probably should really question which office you want to work for in those design ones. You don't want to be, you might not want to be working in somebody else's design sensibility. A lot of offices who do design per se work like crazy shape and whatever, that's all they do. That's one take. You have to speak with that vocabulary of design.
Well, I mean, I've always thought of it as just another instrument in your another tool in your toolbox. So I thought it was interesting that you have to, because you have a design boss and you have to listen to what they say and they have final approval. And I think it's an interesting challenge to try and design something that meets their demands and also satisfies your baseline, understanding of quality. I think it's a really interesting challenge to do. I feel like it feeds the brain in a way.
But I don't know, I'm thinking, let's say like retailers, right?
Sure.
Stores who have like design standards of what they're using. From the outside, you look at a rendering or a photo of a store that's designed, it looks designy, it's been designed. Mm-hmm. But then once you work onto those projects, you realize that you just play with the same tools and the same rules all the time, so your design is limited. Mm-hmm. Right? Design is not a word of freedom. There is limitation and constraint, and depending on what project, what office you work at, it would be a bigger realm or a smaller one. So you just have to be aware of that.
So let's imagine on the extreme end, though, he's in a place where it is very corporate, so they just don't care. It's more about just producing stuff that meets budget and, churning out, multifamily house. I don't know what kind of office this is, but multifamily house or just whatever generic buildings. And as long as it looks remotely contemporary and it'll stand up and be cost effective, they don't care. Okay, well, yeah, then we're dealing with a pretty poisonous place if you're interested in design in any way. So then what I would do is, like you said, find that one person who might be interested in that and have conversations with them, design. Or the longer game would be to see that as an opportunity of freedom. So if they don't care about design, but you do, maybe you put in extra hours and you dictate what the design should be.
That reminds me of a project I was working on where I was doing mostly CA for it. And there was no budget, meaning there was no money, right? It was for a nonprofit organization. There was no money. The client, it's an healthcare facility. They don't have extra pennies to spend on like nice things. Mm-hmm. That's like at the bottom of their list, which I totally get. And that was a challenging project because of that. But I felt like as a young architect, a designer, like I should try and push that a little, because they come to an architect to get a project built. They don't go to a contractor, or they don't do it themselves. They could have, maybe. They came to professionals who have that sensibility to help them out. And, staying within the budget, I came up with some ideas of like, here maybe, like just like some touches here and there to make it a little more interesting than that generic type of design.
Right.
And my boss was completely open with it. It was like, yeah, if go explore, I'm not stopping you. I'm not going to be the one telling you how you should do it or why you should do it, but you seem to be interested. You seem to be willing to try.
Right.
And it worked out at the end.
Yeah.
And it made a huge difference, actually, because I think he made the client more sensible to design. And when they did their other location, now their mindset and their awareness and sensibility evolved. So that was actually the best win out of it,
And, you don't have to be in a position of power to feel like you're getting something out of it. So if you can produce a design and the boss sees the value of it and they go with it, that's like the ideal situation. But let's imagine you have a boss who frankly just doesn't care, and maybe what they do is all they care about is it coming in on budget, and also they just roll in and just choose an option, or they do some shitty sketch and make you do it, right? Well, okay, those are actually different things. So if you have a boss who's sketching things and then you're basically just a draftsman of their ideas, that's one thing. I don't think that's the case here. It's probably more of the situation that the boss is just selecting one option and not really giving a shit. So then it's up to you to produce a couple different options, and you have to produce ones that you yourself like, and then ones that he will approve of. And it's still at the very least, it's still good exercise. It's good practice running, right? Because it could be an opportunity to basically try out your own design skills, which you have confidence in, hopefully, with an actual building, right? Because whatever constraints, more professional constraints and technical ones they have in the office will apply to you later on, regardless of the office that you are at, no matter how design focused it is. So maybe, you know, you view yourself as kind of you are the design component in the office. You take it upon yourself to think of your position in that way, and maybe you act that way and you see what happens, you know. And at best, something positive will come out of it, and the office will realize that now there's this kind of new relationship between them who do things a certain way, and now this younger person who has these who plays ball with us, he gets it, you know, he's not causing problems, he's not an asshole, but also he has this other sensibility he's willing to kind of cultivate within the office. And so that's another way to look at it.
And I think that's a very good point, because if you know if your boss and your firm is receptive to you and what you want to try and do, and they see that you want to take the lead on it, you know, they're most likely going to be supportive.
Yeah.
If, you know, it doesn't cost them more money. So,
you know, the other thing is with learning design, which you continue to do obviously throughout your life, I think maybe sometimes younger designers think that if they go to the if an office does good work and they like their work and they'd like to learn how to design like that or understand what it takes to produce buildings like that if they work at that office, they're going to learn it. That's totally a huge major assumption, because first of all, you don't know how that office is structured. You could go in there and be basically treated as an intern for the next 5 years doing blue foam models and not learn shit, right? It could be that. And you might not interface with the right people. In order for that to happen, the office has to be structured correctly. You have to find the right people. They have to mentor you. They have to be good at teaching to a certain degree. And that also assumes that there's some kind of coherent logic behind the process, which a lot of offices, even the ones that do good work, that appear to be good work, their process is fucking all over the place. It's like, let's produce a bunch of stuff and we're going to choose one, and then you produce more stuff from what I chose, and we just do that over and over. And from the person at the bottom, you know, it's just chaos. There's no thinking behind what from consistency from beginning to end. It's not like a pyramid of data and of design process, you know, where you're honing in towards something, or a few different pyramids, right? It ends up being just a scatter of nonsense.
It's just you're like running blindfolded and hoping you don't crash.
So what this means is that in terms of advancing your design skills, you almost in a way cannot rely on the idea that someone else is going to help you do that. A lot of your own design advancement will happen just on your own, just you doing stuff at your desk, and just, you know, the process of pitting up and getting some kind of feedback and whatever. So it's just doing it. So if you can be in a position to have access to design, thinking and design and work, even if you don't feel like you have a mentor or someone that's going to be receptive, still that might be the bulk of how you're going to learn more about designing buildings anyway, you know. And it's not a bad scenario for you to be in that position, you know, in that pocket, whilst being surrounded by technical people, because you can push against them and they can push against you. And that's the real trick with doing actual buildings anyway, right? Is trying to find out that threshold. What's not good is if you're sitting around a bunch of other people who are, let's say you're highly conceptual and big thinking. What's not good if you're sitting around a bunch of other similar people, because the stuff you produce is not tested in the different ways it's going to have to be eventually, right? So that's that. So the next thing he says is that, you know, I've been looking for a new job for the last 6 months and I want to leave my town and go to Philly. How do I get a job at a great firm doing good work? Because I'm having difficulty.
Let me check. Well, so the first thing I would ask, you know, to that question is, where do you really want to be?
Yeah, okay, in life.
No, you know, because there is a lot of questions in that email, and I think a lot of like, you know, like trying to position where is going to be the next phase for me, kind of thing. And so, to me, moving cities is a big deal. It's not a decision that you can take lightly. And if we're talking about happiness and work, it's a big move because you need to relocate yourself, move all of your shit, lose your friends that you have built, your network that you've built there, and start brand new in a new place, start over everything, and at the same time start a new job because you're going to have to start a new job. So, it's a lot of things happening at once, right? Which is great. It's possible. People have done it. We've done it. People do it all the time. It's completely fine. But
it's not like
is it necessary? Is the place you're thinking of moving the actual place you're thinking of moving? Why is that the place? Those are questions that I think you should ask yourself.
He didn't say why he wanted to go to Philadelphia, but he says like that's where I want to be. So it seems like he's set on it for whatever reasons. You know what I mean? I do think though, before we were saying you have to figure out why you're unhappy with the current situation. And obviously within that very broad question is these things of like, is it the city? Is it the town? Is it the relationships?
Is it the people? Is it the weather?
Yeah. And, maybe you're searching for an ideal combination of all these things and it might not exist. And I think that's also the sign of someone who's going to start their own business eventually, is someone who let me put it this way. So I've been asked a number of times, like, what's the ideal office you'd want to work at back in the day? What are the qualities of this office? And which office is that? And my response is like, that office doesn't exist because I haven't created it yet. And that was very clear to me after working at a bunch of places. That I have this list of criteria, list of things I want to see in an office. And every place, a lot of the places I worked were really great, and they had, a certain number of the qualities that I wanted, but not all of them. And at some point, if you're always feeling like that, then maybe you kind of need to realize, well, maybe it's because I need to take more charge and do my own thing, which is further down the line for him.
Yeah, you just graduated.
But it's just to say that, maybe between all these major components of your life, it could be that for X number of years, X period of time, you can't have everything at once, right? And this is also where, translated more specifically to the skill set or to an architect in this profession, or any profession really, is that you look at all the things you want to achieve and want to learn and et cetera, right? You'd say, okay, I'm going to go to that firm. I'm going to gain this skill set, learn these things. I feel like I've learned that. I go to this next firm. I say, well, I'm super unhappy. I love Philadelphia. Philadelphia is where my family is, or whatever. I don't know. And I know that's going to bring me happiness. And that's the happiness, chart, bar on the bar chart's kind of low. And I want to bring that up because it's not sustainable otherwise. So go to Philadelphia and realize that the other, bars on the bar chart might go down a little bit. And there's this kind of balancing act between all these components. It
is a balance. And you're right. I mean, the place where you live, if you don't, just go ahead. Like I have you on record stealing my water.
This smoothie has a lot of almond butter, and I have a huge headache.
Is that almond butter creates headaches? We'll have to do recording about that.
I think you consume this much of it. I feel like a dog that likes to lick peanut butter.
Right. But no, that's a good point. Like, if it might just be the city that doesn't make you happy, and actually not the work you're doing. Like, I don't know.
So the other go ahead.
But that's why I'm being very insistent on, like, why do you think you need to relocate yourself into a brand new city? Are you just trying to run away from the problem?
Well, actually, it sounds like there's two components. One is that he wants to get a job where he learns more about design, or is doing more design. Yeah. And the other is that he just wants to get out of DC, period.
Yeah. Which is good because, in fact, maybe you're going to end up in Philly, and maybe you already know what type of firm you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at firms that are more design focused. Mm-hmm. So actually, that's pretty good because he knows he's not happy. He knows why he's not happy, where he wants to be.
And it seems like he wants to find a job before moving. That's a great thing to aspire to have lined up. Might not happen, and you might have to kind of accept that. But maybe. So let's say that's not financially feasible. He can't do that. He can't just leap over to a new place without a job. He needs to find something in advance, and he's been looking for already 6 months. And first of all, 6 months, I think maybe to some people sounds like a really long time, and it's not a short amount of time. It's not trivial, but when it comes to finding a job, it's like 95% about timing. So 6 months is not that long.
It's really a bad timing, especially if you have very specific firms you're trying to get into. Like, you have to give them the time to look for people and, you know, make that decision. But I think if you know you want to move, and if you know Philadelphia is your place, then that's it. Like, don't waste time applying to other places in your city. Like, just focus your efforts in that one place. And to be honest, you probably have more chances of landing a job, an interview, if you are already in this location.
Yeah, agreed.
Because like we said in other recordings, you probably want to go in person to give your stuff to these offices. You want to show them how committed and interested you are, and maybe even chit chat and have an idea of when they might be hiring, you know, how far are they in their hiring process. You know, try and get extra information that you might not find on an online post about a job.
It's tough.
And also, I mean, you know, you have an address on your application that says you're already in Philadelphia versus you are somewhere else.
It's tough because he's actually a little bit open to the idea of moving to a completely different place like New York, LA, or San Francisco. You know,
he knows he might have probably more chances to find design firms in those places, but it doesn't sound like his heart is telling him those places first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's not his first choice. I mean, ideally for this person, he'd be in Philly working at a great design office, getting paid out a lot of money, and that would be that. And it seems like he's wrestling with the idea that he might not be able to get all of that. And, you know, do you sacrifice your desire to be in the city you want to be for your, you call it career? I mean, I don't like the idea of calling it a career because it sounds like this kind of separate thing that you desire, like an object. It like, you know, makes it materialistic. It's because it's more than a career. I think for people like this, it's a passion. It's your fucking life. So it's you're trying to decide between the city or the work passion that you have. And again, maybe, you know, just think shorter term, or you think that you could end up going to one of these other places like New York, LA, or San Francisco, and be there for a couple of years and just revel in the fact you're going to be at one of these cool cities. And then you go to Philadelphia afterwards, because let's assume that the Philadelphia market is so small that there's, you know, I don't know, I'll just make up a number, like 5 different great offices or you know, offices that he's interested in working at, you know, and those are the ones at the top. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the rest, there's like a huge gap, you know, in terms of desire from those to the rest. That's a tough, well, actually it's almost the same for New York. So I imagine for Philly, it's even less than 5. Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in. I will say, if Philly is the priority, then I would just take whatever you can get, go there. If Philly is the priority and you know there's at least 3 offices you want to end up at eventually, then go to Philly, work somewhere else, right? Then transition to one of those offices. If it's a small town and you're skilled and talented, I'm sure you could figure it out. And if you present yourself, your work, and your resume and CV to be, you know, this really bright person that has experience in this and where you came from, then they could work. I would not try to get both the best job and lined up before going to Philly and wait for that. You can, of course, but you got to be willing to, again, throw in some Band-Aids in the meantime. The advantage of going to a place, in his case, I would not recommend, I don't know where this person is from originally, but if you're not from the West Coast, I wouldn't recommend going to LA or San Francisco. I think it'll be too much of a radical change. What you want to do, because for one of these cities, New York, LA, San Fran, that's a short-term kind of solution, right? It's a quick detour before you get to the place you want to go to. The advantage of those places is those are global cities. Philadelphia is well known, yes, but it doesn't rival New York, LA, San Francisco. So if you come from New York City, you worked for a couple big name firms, you go to Philly, a smaller marketplace, your desirability is way, I mean, it's not even close. It can be way, way higher than it was before your time in New York City, right? And that's something to consider. So if you just graduated not that long ago and and you are on the younger side and you have some time to kill and you're interested in seeing different parts of the world, which I would recommend also. I mean, different cities in the United States.
The world is the United States.
It really is.
To you.
Then,
how dare you?
I mean, New York is the world. You have Little Italy, you got Chinatown, you know what I mean? going to one of these other places would be cool for a shorter period of time. But that seems to me kind of the two options, right? And in New York, you could find a good office. It might take a couple years, 3 years before you might not get the best office right at the very first moment, but there's so many offices in New York that you could figure something out.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know what kind of design and what design to him means, but if you're interested in design, I would say that fucking New York is where you should go, right?
Well, yes and no. What kind of work he's trying to be interested? He's interested in, you know what I mean? There's a lot of interior work.
But the design, like many facets of the world design in New York City, you can work on so many possibilities of project things and so many approach, and it's a constant thing.
Yeah.
Like even on your personal time, just living in New York City, you embrace, you're swimming in design everywhere you go, everything you see, the people you meet, it's there. If you go to Philly, I've never been to Philly, so I don't really know, but New York is New York. That said, it's if you're worried about the balance and the place you end up being, the lifestyle, New York is a beast. So it's not for everybody.
On the other hand, LA is very desirable, but it's different. LA is much more open. It's on you to be creative and to kind of manifest things. Whereas New York, it's aggressively in your face about what's there, which is really good in terms of like absorbing stuff, right? You can, if you lived in New York for 3 years, those 3 years are just absorbing information, right? Constantly. And at some point you feel like you've absorbed all of it can offer. LA is not quite like that. It's not really giving out that much. And San Francisco, I don't know if you just graduated a couple of years ago, I would say keep San Francisco after these other places. I don't think San Francisco, if you're looking between these three places, San Francisco is by far much further down the list than New York and LA in terms of job opportunities, reputation, atmosphere, and all that stuff for this profession, I feel like. The other thing too is like when we were in New York, we came across a lot of people who, what's the school in Philadelphia? Fuck if I know. I can't remember now.
UPenn?
I'm blanking. No. It's, I don't know. Anyway, but there's a lot of people we met that, have a relationship with Philadelphia in some way.
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, maybe you could just be exposed to the New York design culture without having your feet in it, right? New York and Philadelphia are fairly close to each other. You could go hang out in New York during the weekend, absorb the design stuff, and maybe work for an office and live in Philadelphia.
Let's see, Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. UPenn. I don't know if UPenn's in Philadelphia. Oh, okay. So it's a 2-hour drive from Philly to New York. Yeah. Fucking between these, go to New York. Don't go to LA or San Francisco. You got all this shit to haul around, and it's a totally different culture. New York to Philly, they're more similar in the sense you're going to meet people that you could probably even fucking commute between those two cities. So that's I mean, again, maybe he has some deep love for Philadelphia and hates New York, but outside of that, there's legit reasons to consider going to New York for a little bit of time to enjoy the city, meet some interesting people, build up your reputation, and also your own internal kind of knowledge of stuff. It's something to consider.
Yeah, like I was saying, you can work. I mean, personally, I work on like design furniture, cafes, apartment, like all kinds of stuff from all of the phases of design. So for sure, if you go to a major city, your chances of learning, experiencing, working for design offices is going to be greater than if you go to a smaller city.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but again, you're only spending 8 hours in an office every day. What do you want your life to be? What do you want your lifestyle to be? I think is a big question.
And for sure, I think I would get to the place with whatever job you can get if you need one
First,
in
you
advance,
need to
just get there
first.
and then bounce around because, you hang out with other people in the profession. And it's just that's how opportunities tend to present themselves. Now, I never really did it that way. Did the whole kind of meeting people to find out opportunities. I just fucking applied and ground it out that way. You can do it, but it's not the easiest thing. And it's got the hard way to do things, and it's not necessarily the most fun or social way to do things either.
And finding the right fit for firms also, it takes some moving around, and it takes to have friends who work in other firms who can actually tell you what it is like to work for these people. Mm-hmm. So all that said, I think it takes a while, and you just have to keep moving.
Yeah. Let's see here. What should I do? What should I be doing more than I already am to get an interview? So landing a job at a city that you're not in is difficult. But I don't know if really there would be much more than just creating a good portfolio and things and following
Well,
up.
I have a few things, which some I already mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But first, I don't know how many places he applied to, mm-hmm. right? Is applying to 10 offices many, or is applying to 300 is many,
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
6 months, it's a fair amount of time for, still not have land interviews or another job. So I'm curious of how many applications was sent. Just to give you guys an idea, when we first looked for a job after we moved to New York, we applied to each 300 offices.
More than that,
right? And for me, the process was fairly quick. I landed something fairly quickly because I reached out to people before we moved. Mm-hmm. But for you, I don't know, it took a couple months.
Yeah, a couple months.
Right?
Yeah. A couple months, but yeah, so it's putting some context, a couple months in an extremely dense environment, meaning there's a lot of offices, but that was a few years after the economic crash, so it was not really
so
great
the economy
timing.
wasn't great, and it's New York City, so it's also going to take less time than any smaller city.
Less time for...
Because there's more firms.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Sort of a matter of ratio. So I would say just apply to as many as possible, and even apply to the places you don't want to be hired, because it's good practice. It gets yourself out there. You're more comfortable, and maybe you're going to hear about other offices. Who knows, right? But just get yourself out there.
It's just I think you would view the first job you get at a new place when you're this young as just a stepping stone. Obviously, you don't tell them it's a stepping stone when you go there, but that's what it's going to be.
They know. Also, you go to interviews, and maybe sometimes you get a good surprise. You didn't think much of that office, and the people you met with were great, and you toured their offices, and it seems like a good workplace to be at. And if they offer you a job, then maybe you're going to take it. You don't have to wait for the perfect firm to call you back, because you don't know when that's going to be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's offices that I've wanted to work at desperately, and you apply, once every month or whatever. And even though it's kind of like once a month you just hit send, it's an automatic kind of thing you do. It's still draining to send out that email and not hear back or be declined, or hear that you're not hiring because you're like, are you really not hiring? You don't like me? You're not telling me, whatever. And most of the time, unless you're like some kind of weirdo, it's just because they just aren't hiring.
It's timing.
And then years later, they happen to have a fucking opening, and now they want you. And then internally, you're like, oh, now you fucking want me. After I've been through all this stuff, and my portfolio is not any different really, but now you want me. And they're like, yeah, because we've got a bunch of projects and we need people. So come on board.
So I would say apply to more places than you would
apply to a bunch of places
at first, right? And the one you really want to work at, just keep applying, but keep in mind that you might have to take a job in between your dream firm and the one you're currently at.
And we're all about, I think, keeping in touch with people, because it is a weird thing. It's human nature. People that hire, it's like you tend to hire whoever happens to be around. Yeah. And that's for fucking everyone, really. But you do want to give it a little bit of break. So if you're following up every 3 weeks, on schedule for 3 months, then you got to give it some rest, because they're
going to block you.
You will wear out the ears at some point. And that's a tough thing, because at least for me, then I think, well, what if I give it a 3 month break? What if they hire someone in that time, kind of, But the other thought that occurred to me is he's so close to both of these places it's not that far in terms of driving, even, especially flying. One option is to just drive over to Philly or New York or whatever, take a bus, take the Bolt bus or whatever the fuck, and, go by foot and go to old school. And again, that's kind of like the Hail Mary, but it's a possibility because it's not like he's going from France to California.
No, but it's hard because you have to take time off, and how many places can you see in one day? But if you're really motivated to get out, then you
just know the returns are not likely on something like that.
It's tough, but stay motivated. That's a big thing. The other thing is, as far as maybe bettering your chances of getting a return on interviews or a job, is sometimes I feel like people underestimate their cover letter. They kind of like put the generic stuff and they all look the same and they're not personable, and people just kind of skim over. And if that's the first thing that they that they receive in their mailbox when you in their emails when you apply, is what they see is your cover letter, right? So you got to make sure that you catch them right there. Because if you don't, they're just gonna be like, yeah, whatever, next. Like, they need someone to like wake them up and like question them. So I would say don't underestimate the cover letter. Try to make it as more personable as possible. Meaning like you actually wrote it, you didn't copy paste the same one for 300 offices.
Yeah, be succinct, which is something I'm not good at, but be succinct.
Be short, and you can always like flatter their work, not too much in a kiss-ass way, but be like, I've really, really aligned with the value that you've put in this project, and so on and all that. And make sure you also mention your goals in that new job you're looking for.
So that reminded me that, I think sometimes when you're at a place that you're not happy with and you're trying to find a job that's going to offer you something different, that kind of negativity that exists within you seeps out in places where it shouldn't, and at times that it shouldn't. So, for example, you never talk about an employer at an interview, in any severe way. And we're going to do an episode about interviewing actually coming up. So you should call the hotline 213-222-6950. Can you tell that I really want people to call? You
give me your dirty face when you do that.
Call that hotline. Yeah, call me up. But so that's like one thing. And also even the way you write stuff and the goals that you have when you're talking about your goals, you don't say, I've been doing this, but I'm not interested in that. I want to do this thing instead. What you should do is think about the experience you've gained and are gaining currently as being very desirable things, right? So
you're just stealing my lines.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So an ideal situation is where the new office you're going to is maybe more design focused, but they're lacking the more technical and professional understanding of stuff, which now you have. I mean, you only have 2 years of experience, but you have to a certain degree, right? Compared to other candidates at your level. Now you guys fit together like pieces of a puzzle, right? And that's the way you can kind of think of yourself, or at the very least think about the experience and the stuff that you're going through now as being positive, very, very desirable, like more quantifiably and objectively worthy of your time. And I think that bleeds off in interviews and resumes and other things like that. So an employer will see, here's this person. They've expressed they're really interested in design, stuff like that. And we know that they're patient and mature because they've also recognized they need to gain this skill set. They're gaining that skill set, and now they want to change.
And that makes me think about, know who your competition is, right?
Yeah.
If the other people applying for that same position, a junior type position, right? Most likely, oftentimes, their experience is going to be more on the design phase of projects because they don't have much knowledge coming out of school. They kind of know how to design, they know how to make good renderings, they have a good sensibility about aesthetics, but their technical knowledge is inexistent and it takes time to teach them. So a lot of them would have most likely a design background as in their skill set. If, however, you've been working on very technical stuff for the past couple of years, and you're one of the 5 few that apply for the job, well, you're extremely valuable, man, because they won't have to teach you all that stuff. You already know it, right? And if you have a good sense of design because they can see that in your portfolio, then that's a win-win. Yeah. They know that that you're the perfect candidate, right? So I would say, yeah, try to think about who else will be applying for that job and how you are different from these people, and try to just highlight that in bold, bright yellow everywhere you can, because that's what is going to make you desirable.
Yeah.
And stand out from the crowd.
No, absolutely. And there's something about, again, that positivity and matureness and it's really clear when you're interviewing someone and they're younger, when the younger person is only able to see like 3 feet in front of them, and they're like, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, I don't like that, I like this, I like that. And, on the one hand, maybe that's because this person is really passionate, but for someone that's been in the profession for a bit of time, it's kind of like, all right, slow down here, be a little more thoughtful in your moves and see the bigger picture. So if you can present yourself and communicate that you have that kind of understanding, I think that's really powerful. And
I think, you want to present yourself as being thankful for what you've got and humble. You don't want to sound like a snobby asshole who like knows everything already. So, you want to, kind of keep it on the down low, but still very positively present yourself without, overselling yourself. It needs to be natural. And if you're young, like you got out of school like 2 years ago, you should still be humble, because you're talking, your cover letter and your application is going to go to people who have many years of experience. Mm-hmm. And you can, you have a lot to learn. So that should be sensible in your letter. They should sense that you still have a lot to learn. Yeah. Yeah, and that you're happy. Yeah. So the last thing you would say is that I'm unhappy at my job. Like, you don't say that, right? Because it's a weird thing in terms of hiring, even in this profession where we care about the work a lot. It's really about the people. People want to work with happy people, right? You smile, you feel happier. People like emailing with folks that say, have a great day at the end of the email. So the last thing he brings up is, maybe first go back to the one that we were meant to go over, which is what should I be doing more than I already am to get an interview? So in addition to the things we said, I don't know if there's anything else. I think just stay with it, and don't just don't give up. Don't
get discouraged. Is the biggest thing. That's
why you should apply to offices you don't really care for, because that will keep you satisfied to see that other people want you. It's
the other thought I had actually just now is that maybe a resume starts to look stale after a period of time, and companies and employers are interested in seeing someone that's like proactively doing stuff. So if on your resume it's like, I've been working at the same job for 2 years and nothing else has been happening in my life, then maybe you have to think about adding some sprinkles to it to make it seem like you're more engaged and more involved with things.
Yeah, and one of the things I did a few times when I applied for a job was I would also provide them with references. Sure. So like there is people that they can call up to hear more about you, and you shouldn't be shy, but and or even like more details about like the actual information that you give about your experience in certain offices is crucial. Mm-hmm. Because if you mention, I work on healthcare, hospitality, residential project. Okay, that's very generic. I actually don't know what you've been working on. If you say, I work in like a 15,000 square feet house in the Hamptons and like a 2-story condo, reuse, LEED qualified building. Okay, now they know a little more about the scale of the project, certification, like they have a better sense of your experience.
I think that's true. And I think also tailoring the information to the firms that you're going to. So for example, if you're going to apply to an office that does much more theoretical kind of thinking, why would they hire someone who has this kind of more corporate, I don't know what that noise is, corporate kind of knowledge, right? What are you doing?
Checking something.
What are you doing? That kind of corporate knowledge. And like I said before, it could be good because you're complementary with each other, but maybe let's suppose it's the other way where it just feels like they have no aligned interest. They claim they have interest in what we're doing, but I don't see any proof of that. So you need to provide proof. So either that's by expanding on the tasks that you completed, like you said, but in a particular way that makes it sound like you're in line with their thinking. Because an employer wants to hire someone knowing that that person is going to be happy with them and they want to help people. So if I have a candidate who, is at a job, he's learning certain kinds of skills. They're not exactly what we do, but he's learning these skills, and it's very clear he's very passionate about this other stuff. And I think I can offer him a job. I know he's going to be super happy with me because he's look at these interests, right? Then that's a great partnership. But if there's no sign of that, no material sign of that in the resume or their work, then that's a big leap, right? Am I going to hire this person and then they're not really actually going to be happy and it's going to be a problem in the long term or even the short term? So what that means is, let's say you wanted to go to a place where there's a lot of theoretical discussion. So, for example, one of the things that some of the people we knew, New York, our friends, what we had for a short period of time was this architecture group, and we just got together. It was informal. We did readings. It sounds really nerdy. We did readings. We got together and okay, let's say we had beer. It makes it more exciting, right? Beer and chocolate. And we would talk about the readings and stuff, right? Because we had all graduated and we're missing that kind of theory seminar thing that we liked so much. And it lasted for not very long, but we did that. Well, that's on the resume because it should be, and it was a legitimate thing for a period of time. But something like that shows that you were actively doing stuff. The resume without anything like that is just naked.
Yeah, and I would just refer to you guys to listen back to our episode 106 about how to make a resume that gets you hired.
That's what you're doing.
Yes.
It's on the wall behind over there.
No, seriously, I think to better your chances, just, take a good look at your cover letter, take a fresh look at the resume, really listen to that episode because there's a lot of many good tips in it, and we're not going to repeat ourselves. But that should help you.
But does that make sense? So it's like,
yes,
you got to have the color, the red sprinkles for the red office.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. The last one?
All right, the last thing he mentioned was, do you have any advice on how to find a mentor and how does that relationship begin? So, David, I'm asking you, have you found your mentor? We don't care. The
mentors I've had, and mentor is kind of honestly, if you have enough of an ego, you think the word mentor is demeaning. It's like, I don't have a fucking mentor. People who say good things sometimes.
People come to me.
I listen to them every now and then. They call them a mentor. Mentors is kind of a weird word, but anyway, the ones that I've had, they just happened by chance. And that's not advice at all, but that's what happened. I happened to have a teacher.
That's often how it begins.
Yeah. I had a teacher and he had cool orange pants, and I was like, this guy, I think maybe I dig what he's saying. And he has orange pants. It's a bonus. Let's talk. And then I've stayed in touch with that person. Oh shit, it's been a while now. It's kind of weird. It's kind of crazy. And other people in my life. But it's always been by chance. But of course you can catalyze that process for sure.
I feel like, to me, well, a lot of time, like bigger offices would give you what they call a mentor when you start, right? Yeah. They would put you under the umbrella of a capital M mentor, which to me actually is more of like a tutor type of role than necessarily a mentor. It's more someone that's here to back you up and like check on you once in a while, but it's not an inspirational mentor. It's not like, the architect that you want to be in 30, 40 years. It's more like a bodyguard in a way, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's a very assigned kind of
not
situation.
That we like, thinking about the meaning of every single word, but really the word mentor has different meaning, and I think oftentimes is not used in the right way. Huh. So if you're looking for more of a tutor or mentor, then maybe the offices you're going to end up at is going to provide you one, and that's it. Otherwise, same as you, I feel like it's really just by chance and meeting people, and it's really just people you resonate with, people that you feel have the same beliefs as you have and the same interests, or people that have accomplished things and you wish that when you reach their age you will have accomplished those things. There are people that you probably would feel like you can learn things from and that are interested in sharing things with you,
right?
And I did have a few mentors. I also had very good teachers in school that I became friends with, and eventually fades away, or it lasts for different periods of time, or previous employers that I have very good experience with and I'm now became friends.
Yeah. And there's different kinds of mentor. And I think the ones that have been the most important for me have been more about life, right, is the subject rather than architecture specifically. They're in the profession, which helps because there's, some kind of more specific issues that occur between architects, but it's life. And I think the ultimate mentor is someone who can advise you on all different kinds of things, because when we make a decision like he's facing here, again, there's hundreds of variables that are floating in the air, and you need to be able to navigate through this kind of asteroid field to see which ones you really need to pay attention to, and to provide hierarchy to it and categorize it. Like, you got to be, and that's really difficult to do because of the nuanced networked nature of all these decisions, right? So, but I think the kind of life mentor in that sense is the most helpful, because I think that strategy or way of thinking to problem solve complex situations like this one can get applied to more specific things, even if it's just within architecture, right? Does that make sense? So broader things can get applied to more specific things. Broader thinking can get applied to more specific things. And I think that's true. The other thing that reminded me of is, you should, I want to go on more on the mentor thing, but also you should just talk to people. The more you say things out loud to different people, the clearer it'll become, weirdly, just because you say it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, you have to tell people who you are, otherwise, I think the mentor thing is a
reciprocal.
Whatever. Yeah, let's do it in French.
Yeah.
What the fuck it. And also, I think you can have multiple mentors.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. The different mentors are different things.
For different things. So, No, but so it's not. I'm not really for polygamy in general, but coming with mentors, yeah, sure, have as many as you can.
So if you're looking for a mentor specifically with like your design thinking or in the profession, then and you think there's someone who, so how to start the relationship, that's his question, right? So in one case, like for me in school, I did a lot of readings, reading of Michael Sorkin's work, and through the readings you begin to know Michael Sorkin, because if you know his writing, it's very personal in a way. Even though he talks about kind of things objectively, it's still very personal. And so I felt like when I read the stuff that I'm starting to know the passions of this person, and I believe in what he's saying, right? And the way I started the relationship with him is I called him. I just fucking called him. And I didn't get to him at first. I got to some person that worked in the office. And then the next phone call was with him. And then I met him in his office. And then it sparked a kind of, relationship in a way. And we're not like super close friends, but there's some kind of something there, right? And he's really interesting. So that's the easy thing to do to start something. You just take that leap. And the thing that I've found, and it could be a phone call to someone like Michael Sorkin, which is a stretch because he's Michael Sorkin, or it could be just someone in the office who you think is kind of interesting. You want to find out more if they could fill the shoes of mentorship that you're looking for, then just grab a beer with them, get a coffee with them. And I think you will find that a lot of people are really open to that. Yeah, I'll have a phone call with you. Yeah, let's grab a cup of coffee, or let's, have a chat or whatever it might be. You don't want to do email. You want to keep it to either phone or in person. That's pretty much it, right? And that older people who might be in that kind of mentor status are willing to do that. And if they're not, then they're just disqualified. They're just the filtering system. So that's one really easy, simple thing to do, is to just reach out first. It's the same thing as applying in an office. You don't know if you're going to get the job unless you apply.
Yeah, and maybe be social. You never know. No, seriously, be social with your, coworker. Be social with your teammate. Be social. Go to events. Meet people that are in the field. You never know. You can have great surprises.
And, he says, like, how does that mentorship or how does that relationship begin? It begins like with a beer, with a coffee, with a casual chat, and then it grows. Because the best mentorships, like we were kind of describing, they're not these assigned, like, let's have a session, half an hour every week. They tend to be ones where it's like you call up and say, like, I'm trying to decide if I take this job, and an architectural, professional mentor will help you decide whether or not this firm or that firm is better. But be damn sure that there's all these other variables that they have to be able to help you with as well, right? So either you need a few all-arounders or different ones, but this is kind of how I view things,
Yeah, maybe you can become a mentor.
And
to someone.
The other thing too with this question is he's already done it. I think he's reached out to us, and I wouldn't proclaim that we're mentors, but we obviously are some kind of resource, if not for answers, then at least for some stimulating dialogue, hopefully, and at least prodding more questions and provoking more thought. So you, having gone through all of this, I feel, because I don't think we're going to have time to get to the other one today. I feel that this person's in a good place. He has his head on straight. I think I don't see any reason why things won't work out if he, stays positive, and stays going. And I think it's fantastic that he would listen to something like what we're doing and actually bother to reach out to ask. That in itself is a sign that's going to separate him. Now, this is kind of also self-stroking, ego stroking, but I don't mean it to be. But it also separates him from other people. The fact that he even took initiative, right?
Oh yeah,
to reach out to whoever he's reaching out to. That's the big hurdle.
Yeah.
So on that note, thanks for the email. Thanks for the note, and hopefully we provided some kind of context of how we would talk about this if we were facing these decisions.
And if not, maybe we just boost your motivation back to the 100% level.
Yeah, and we also enjoy talking about these things and feel comfortable giving as much as advice or as little as conversation around these subjects, because these are questions that we've had to face and answer numerous times in our professions as young architects and young designers. And we spend a lot of time thinking about these things. So it's good to kind of to share it, and hopefully it'll help some of you figure things out as well. And if you have any other questions about the stuff we talked about today, or specific ones to you, then again, reach out to that hotline. The phone number is 213-222-6950. And of course, email, we're around there, social media and stuff. And if you do reach out...
And the email is?
hello@midnightcharette.com. If you do reach out, I think specificity is helpful and context is helpful. Any kind of messaging is great, but the generic, how do I make a portfolio? Well, we have a podcast on that, so you just listen to that. But more context, because these kinds of, again, they are very complicated problems, and they require a certain amount of information of what's going on. But yeah, any questions you have or feedback and things you disagree with, you're like, hey, going to New York's a fucking terrible idea. Why would you suggest that? Call that hotline, let us know, and we can talk about it. And
share if you have a similar situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, you have other tips that, you would like to share with this person and us. Send them along. Or,
if you've been listening to these questions and you're like, hey, I got some advice for this person. I faced a similar thing. I did these steps and it worked out for me, and I want to, tell my story, then definitely call that hotline. We want to get everyone communicating. Or if it's like, you're in something similar and you're struggling and you just need a positive message, that's fine as well. Other than that, we're on all the social medias, of course. And, of course, leave a review. That's the one, right? There's too many things to announce. Leave a review in the podcast app. That's the big one that helps. If you thought this was helpful, and give us a review on. Can they give a review on Facebook? On Stitcher?
I think so. You can review on Facebook if you go to our Facebook page. On the left somewhere, it should say review, and you can leave 5 stars or however many stars you want to give us.
Stitcher, YouTube, all that stuff. And I think that's it for this one.
And share it with your friends,
Yeah, absolutely.
You made
absolutely.
the episodes to all of your family members, all of your classmates, teammates, your boss. Like, just share it.
So I really enjoyed this discussion. Actually, I'm glad we did it. We've been, I think, sort of putting off the idea of talking about the communications with listeners on the podcast because we don't want it to be too much question answer. That's not quite the relationship we want to foster. But I feel like it's. I think this could be good.
Yeah. And again, I think, the tips and tactics was created to bring resources together, and we're only 2 people, so our resources are limited. Really.
And the shortcomings of the tips and tactics is that it's just us throwing out information. Mm-hmm. And we actually, in fact, almost all the tips and tactics episodes, those were not the first recordings we did. Like for the portfolio, it took, I think, 3 separate recordings, and not until the third one did we did it a third time and then kind of got it to a point where we liked it. Because again, we've gone through all these things before, but then to structure it in a way that makes some kind of sense in a podcast proved to be more challenging than we thought. But of course, the shortcomings with all of those is that there's all these kinds of cracks of information that are specific to different things, and I think this session and these questions that he posed really highlight that. So keep the questions coming.
Yeah, and we have an episode about interviews coming out.
Yeah.
Right. So same thing. It would be great to have some of your questions, struggle, stories to share about that as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks again to this person for reaching out. Thank you for listening, and we'll keep the dialogue going in the future. This is the Midnight Charette signing off. I don't know why the fuck I would say that, but whatever. We'll talk to you again next week or sooner. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.